Chapter 3 Literature Review and Technical Reading. A literature review is a survey of scholarly sources on specific topic. It provides an overview of current knowledge, allowing you to identify relevant theories, methods, and gaps in existing research. It is one of the important steps in conducting a research, which involve finding the relevant publications such as books and journals articles, critically analyzing them, and explaining what you have found. In other words, it involves a lot of technical readings. First, let us look at the goal of the literature review. It is to know the use of the content, ideas, approaches in the literature to correctly identify the problem. In other words, it's meant to identify a problem in the rigorous manner. Also, it is to advocate a specific approach adopted to understand the problem, which is meant to analyze a problem. And lastly, it is to assess the choice of method used as an effort to seek for solutions. Normally, we start doing the literature review at the initial stage of the research. This is the stage that involves a lot of learning about the problem, analyzing the problem, as well as seeking potential solutions for the problem. This learning process will be founded on a lot of existing knowledge, relevant theories, which are published in credible sources, such as books and journals articles. You will have to find the right sources so that the information given is reliable and proven. Then you will need to critically analyze them and trying to gain something new from the existing knowledge. Since that we are talking about something new, in the research field, it is normally referring to the new knowledge. These are the definitions of the new knowledge, which is not yet exists, on basis of or supported by existing knowledge, and it should be significant. You need all these three components for the new knowledge that you are exploring to be of interest of the research community. And these are the sources where you can acquire the existing knowledge, which include reading and surveying the literature, studying the textbook, as well as reading the research paper. There are slight differences between the textbook and the research paper. Normally, the textbook contains a lot of knowledge which is older and more established. Meanwhile, the research paper normally consists of newer works. If you are looking for the latest trend of the technology, you might want to look into the research paper. While if you are looking for more established knowledge, which lay the fundamentals of a particular topics, a textbook can be a good reference. Depending on the purpose of the review, you will need to make good use of all the references for the existing knowledge wisely. These are a few purposes of having the literature review. It is meant to establish foundations for advancing knowledge. It facilitates the theoretical growth. It points out the areas that might be of interest, as well as it opens new avenues for possible works. This too is where you understand the knowledge, covering the breadth and depth of the topics, taking into considerations of the latest development of the field of study, based on the understanding acquired, you are able to make sense of the fundamental concepts and observe the evolutions of the knowledge in terms of the theoretical growth. Next, you will need to analyze all the informations and the knowledge that you have acquired, finding some gap of the knowledge or identifying a few specific areas which might be of interest and worth for further study, which is this stage, determining the focus and set for the directions. Then you start to look for the possible explorations or extensions of the works, which is this stage. This stage involves critical analyzing, while this stage is looking for other new possible solutions, which require critical inputs as well as synthesis of the knowledge. There are a few recommendations for the literature review, which is termed as the do's and don'ts for the literature review. First, when you write the literature review or when you are doing the review of the literature, you should focus more on the concept, not on the authors. The concept is more important. The linkage and the storylines between the concepts is also important, and knowing the authors is giving credits to the authors. Ultimately, your literature review should center around the concepts, not on the authors. Secondly, you are not to draw hasty conclusions. Don't be biased, and you should not be misled by your prior understanding of a knowledge, especially those knowledge which you have learned in your undergraduates. It is not that the knowledge that you have gained from the undergraduates are wrong, but more often those knowledge are quite fundamentals. The purpose of having those knowledge being introduced in the undergraduate studies is to cover the breadth of the knowledge, so that those undergraduate graduates have sufficient fundamental knowledge for them to perform their tasks in the industry. Some of the theories and principles has already been simplified, may also be on basis of some ideal assumptions, which leads to the understanding of the partial of the entire pictures. No matter how confident are you with the knowledge that you have acquired before that, try to clear your mind, not to be biased, and start learning the knowledge that you have gained from the literature review from the start, all over again. During the learning process from the literature review, you will need to make sense of the concepts in various aspects and also in various situations. Not only the breadth you have to look into, you will have to also look into the depth of the knowledge. Therefore, try not to draw hasty conclusions. You will need to also look into the individual references to determine the underlying causes, assumptions, and mechanisms. This is an important step where most of the theories are based on certain assumptions or derived based on certain working mechanisms. You will have to look into those, and you will have to see if those assumptions and mechanisms are in line with the situations that you are studying. Some may be in line, some may not be in line. Those which are not in line with your situations, you cannot make direct comparison or directly adopt from the existing theories. You will have to identify the parts of the assumptions which is not in line. See if you can make adjustment in terms of those assumptions. As a consequences of such adjustment, The theory or the principle may evolve slightly. Only then you can adopt or you can make direct comparisons. Personally, I feel this is one of the most essential steps which most of the postgraduate students should learn. As in their undergraduates, the focus is on the applications of some theories and principles. Although those causes, assumptions, and the mechanisms are also outlined, normally those principles and theories draw more attention to the undergraduate students and is easily being ignored. However, when you come to the postgraduate studies, different research projects may have different problems to be resolved. Some problems even look similar, but the situations and the scenario may be different. This will lead to different possibilities and conditions of the problems. Therefore, you are supposed to really dig into the causes, assumptions, and the mechanism in order for you to decide whether those theories can be directly being applied in your research study. Next is synthesizing the available information in a meaningful way. Synthesizing means that you have a lot of knowledge. You will need to find their linkage. You might need to make some emergence of the knowledge, or you may need to modify some parameters in order to fit your conditions. That means you need to first understand the knowledge, knowing all the parts of the knowledge, and start utilizing the knowledge in the creative ways so that you can adopt in your situations. And you will have to use those informations and knowledge in a meaningful way. That means those knowledge should fit the needs of your projects and it should serve some purposes of the studies. The message here is not demonstrating how good understanding of you on certain knowledge. If you have demonstrated sufficient understanding of the knowledge, but if you do not know how to apply it, it is not meaningful anyway. It may also come to a situation that you are able to synthesize some knowledge, making the entire things to be very complicated, which in fact the problem can be solved in a much simpler ways, and this will make the synthesis of the knowledge to be not meaningful as well. The ultimate goal is to solve a problem effectively, systematically, and complexity is not a must to solve the problem. You should not get into the wrong directions that as long as I have demonstrated sufficient complexity, that means I am more knowledgeable and my research project is more qualified. That is not the idea. What you can see from the recommendations here, it reflects the purpose of the literature review, and the ultimate goal is to fulfill the purpose of the project. You will have to identify what is the focus and what is not. The concept will be the focus. The conclusion should be right. The underlying causes, assumption, and mechanism should be in line, and the synthesis of the knowledge will have to be meaningful. These are a few scopes of the literature review. For example, you will need to outline what is already known. You will need to provide the details of the key concepts and the main factors or parameters and the underlying relationship between those. You might need to describe any complementary existing approaches. You might need to study in critical to identify any inconsistency or shortcomings of the published works. Identify the reported results that are inconclusive or contradictory, and also to provide some reasons to do further works in the field. If you look at the list of the scopes to be covered in the literature review, you know there are elements of summarizing what it is being known, and most of the undergraduate and postgraduate students can do that. The problem is, most of the students, they stop at summarizing the informations. This makes the literature review is not a literature review. It will be like a summaries of the theories or principles. As the term review implies, that means there will be critical analysis as well as some critical inputs from the researchers. Simply said, literature review is not summarizing or organizing the knowledge, as it only consists part of the literature review. You will need to really review the literature based on the information that you have consolidated as thorough as possible. Then you will have to analyze and look into various aspects. Try to find the correlations and the linkage between the concepts, the factors, as well as the parameters. If you have already involved with doing literature review, you will also observe that there are so many relevant journals papers that you have found. Different papers are describing different projects. Their scenarios and situations might not be similar. It seems that every single projects are unique. It is sometimes very hard to make direct comparison apple to apple. This is where you're going to analyze in details, trying to make sense the concepts and how the parameter responds under different circumstances. All the information given by different papers, it will end up to be in the fragment conditions, which if you consolidate them together, it will give you a bigger pictures of the underlying knowledge, concepts and fundamentals. You will need to put those fragmented pieces together to see the entire picture. Therefore, it is not just a summary. After you have put those pieces together, then you are able to identify where are the missing pieces, or where are the parts that contradictory among different researchers, and where are the parts that's overlaying. For the overlaying part, I guess is much more easier. That means different researchers in different situations give the similar findings. You have many researchers to cross-check each other, and more or less you can confirm that the theory being introduced by those researchers is more or less reliable. Also, for the parts that which are missing pieces, this could be the areas that you would like to study, and you will have to look into the value of that pieces. By adding that missing pieces in the entire picture, will it bring meaningful effects to the entire body of knowledge? Will it extend the territory of understandings based on the current established knowledge? And this could be a good areas for you to contribute in the study. Sometimes you also encounter there are some contradictory findings between different researchers. In this case, you will have to look carefully into all the underlying causes, assumptions and mechanisms, trying to make sense that any particular reason behind these contradictory findings. There could be a specific reasons for that. You might want to look into the aspects that the principles may be applicable in one conditions, but is not applicable for a certain specific conditions. This will be the parts that you might want to identify. Or sometimes you will encounter that a large group of researchers giving certain findings, while one or two giving the contradictory findings. Again, try not to penalize those in the minority. Although you may want to suspect there could be some errors or something which is different from the majority of the researcher. Again, you will have to look in depth regarding their conditions. It might sometimes ends up you find those contradictory findings, but when you study deep into the concepts, you can't find the reason why their findings is inconsistent. This one also never mind. You can just honestly stating that the inconsistency observed between this group of researcher and the other group of researcher, which for the time being, the reason behind the different findings is unknown. That means you admit that you do not know what is the reason behind it. At least you have pointed out the inconsistency between the findings of different group of researcher. And whoever is interested with the field of study later might want to consider that as a part of their study. With that said, you don't have to always be able to give the answers for all the problems. In fact, the purpose of the literature review is for you to know what is already known and to venture into the areas which is unknown. Having the areas which is unknown to be established, that gives you a reasons why you need to proceed with your words. That will be the third part of the literature review.